Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you, and today I'm bringing you a fun interview that I did with Mark Zonder of A to Z. Of course, Mark played drums on this, produced this album, and he has been playing drums in so many great bands over the course of the last 35, 40 years, including Warlord and Fates Warning, plus a plethora of other projects as well. So, Mark's first time on the Metal Command show in my almost 25-year history, and I have to say that it was a great interview, and he's one of these people that I wish I would have had on this show more often, but better late than never, and Mark and company have put out an amazing record. Ray Alder's vocals are tremendously awesome on this, and he really, we talk about the songwriting on this album, and he really does write some of the best vocal melodies I've ever heard him write. And on top of that, to me, this is one of the most flawless albums I have ever heard. So we're going to talk more about that in the interview, so check it out. Don't forget, if you like what you see and hear, hit the subscribe button, and you can hit that little bell to be informed anytime I post a video. So like, share, leave a comment. I'm curious to what you think about the interview and what you think about this new album by A to Z. So with that said, here is the interview with myself and Mark Zonder from A to Z. Check it out. Mark, I welcome you to the show. I'm really excited to have you on, and this is your first time ever coming on in my 25 years of doing this, with almost 25 years. And
what took you so long?
Right. Well, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to start this off with some comments about the record here, and I'm curious what your thoughts are when I say this. To me, and I'm a little bit of a latecomer to this, I had this sitting here, for quite a while. And I'm actually, again, as I always talk about religiously, it's a victim of the numbers game. Sometimes you get so many releases thrown at you that it's sort of, you want to hear it, but it's like a stack of CDs sitting in front of you. And I got to tell you, I'm going to explain to you why I'm saying this. I think this is a flawless record. And what I mean by that is, it has the perfect amount of melody. It's very song oriented compared to, say, doing stuff with Fates Warning, for example. But there's just a little bit of progressiveness in it, but not a lot. But it has that perfect formula for a song where you write 3 or 4 minute songs, 5-minute songs maybe, and it's just real catchy. And it's real easy to get into this record from the first song all the way to the end. I can tell you that there wasn't one track where I felt like, hey, I need to skip this. You always run into that. You're not into it at first, but this thing is unbelievable. And then on top of that, every musician on this album is on point with everything that they're playing, as far as, to the point where I was singing a lot of these songs, in the car. That's kind of how it went. But that's what kind of record this is. And talk about that, maybe I'm alone in this, but I know a lot of people that love this album, and I'm curious to what your thoughts are to what I just said.
You're absolutely wrong, because the album sucks. I appreciate it. To be honest with you, it's the same feeling that I have. And when I started this in the very beginning, and it was my idea, and everybody laughs and, oh, Zonder's full of himself, or he's whatever, too brutal. I said beer commercial, car commercials, and Cobra Kai. We're not playing odd time. We're not doing 12-minute songs. Been there, done that. Not even a big fan of it, technically, to be honest with you. I'm not a big fan.
Okay.
My things, the greatest concert I ever saw was Gary Wright, Fleetwood Mac, Peter Frampton, Dave Mason, and Robin Trower. Unbelievable musicians. The one thing they all have in common is great songs.
Right.
Okay. So this thing was all about song oriented. I didn't want to hear, oh, we don't hear a single. Oh, where's the hook? Oh, let me listen. Here's the Kiss of Death. Hey, why don't let me listen to it 5 or 6 times and I'll let you know. It's like, okay. My whole thought, and everybody joined in on it. It just was, everybody went. The beautiful thing, and I think a lot of what you're talking about is we were all going down that same path. It's not like one dude was trying to bust into the 12-minute song or anything like that. It was all about the lyric. It was all about the hook. It was all about the melody. It was about the, whether it's Separate Ways, whether it's Jane by the Starship, hit songs, Foreigner's whole catalog, basically. Kind of looking to do that, but I knew with the guys that I had, it was going to get a little proggy. Not proggy. It was going to get the musicianship would be excellent, and we wouldn't lose the people that were into the prog and they want to hear the little things and they want to hear the great playing. I knew that would be there.
Right.
But I was really trying to go for the masses. I was really trying to go for, just everybody could get into this. I picture, a big concert. It's a very positive record to me. Not necessarily we're talking about lyrics, but just the vibe and the feel.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it in a big place. You can see the audience participation. I could see the singing along to the different choruses. But no, everything in this band was basically done like thinking it out ahead of time. We just didn't get together and say, hey, man, let's jam. Let's see what we have. It was, very formulaic as far as where we were trying to go with it. And when Viv and I and Jupe and Philip were all putting the music together before it got to Ray, we were very conscious of that. Okay, verses, choruses, bridges, or repetitive parts, almost a pop mentality and how production is done and the way the song is. And the very interesting story is we did not tell Ray like, hey dude, we think this is where the vocal verse should be, this is where the chorus. We had our own things obviously when we were doing it, like in our mind, what we were thinking about. I just gave him the music and said, hey, do whatever you want. He sang verses where I thought there should be choruses. He sang choruses where I thought that I just naturally would think that they don't have to be. He sang over some musical parts. He came in quicker than we thought he was going to, kind of thing. It was brilliant. And I think that is where that thing that you're talking about, whether it's flawless or a magical record, I like to look at it as like it's magic. Doesn't sound like anybody else. It's not pretentious. It's not two really good songs and a bunch of crap and a blues jam. Like you said, we looked at it as 11 singles and going that way, So no, I appreciate the comments. I think it's an amazing record, and I'd be the first one to tell you which ones I've done in my career aren't amazing. So I'm just very honest with it. So no, I appreciate the nice comments, but and again, I think the other thing that I've seen while doing press and stuff is people are getting it. They know it's not Fates Warning. They know it's not a prog band. They know it's not the new Emerson, Lake and Palmer. It's I tried in the very beginning to get all that out of the way, saying, people, this is what we're selling hot dogs here. We're selling hot dogs. If you want a taco, you got to go over there. I don't, you know what I mean?
Right.
I was just trying to, being very smart about it.
Well, I will go back to a couple things that you said. So let me talk about the production, because that's something I forgot to mention in my first comments. Is the production is very clean. It's very polished, and everything is, you can hear everything clearly. You don't have any frequencies that are basically muddled up. And then something that I think is a big problem that has been happening, and I don't know why I'm the only one that speaks about this, but it doesn't sound like other people's records. And here's where I'm going with that. There are you have 5 or 6 or 7 guys that produce and make records. And what ends up happening is a lot of these bands go to them, and then you start hearing a lot of similarities, like, did they use the same virtual drummer, things like that. And I have found this has started to happen with a lot of the thrash metal bands. I've found that certain producers, have that signature sound, but then a lot of bands go to them and you start hearing a lot of that starting to sound the same. With this, doesn't sound like that. And that is partially what I mean by the production is great, but then you have everything, all the frequencies and everything of meshing this stuff together, people don't realize is not easy. But everything's crystal clear and you can hear it. And that is something for me, I listen for that kind of stuff and I notice weird stuff like that. But that was the first thing. That was one of the first things I noticed actually when I was listening to it. And then the true test of any really good sounding record, can you put it in a bad stereo or a horrible sound system like my company vehicle, and will it still sound good? And the answer is yes. And that is something I think you really accomplished. I don't think gets talked about, when it comes to people even reviewing this album.
I don't think people this day and age care that much about that. Put it this way. They care when it doesn't sound good, and they'll love to dog you for that.
Right.
And that was another thing from the beginning. I knew this had to be home run thing. I sent it out to 8 different guys.
Yeah.
True story. I sent it out to a guy who has 9 Grammys. That, big time guy. Not happening. And that's that same thing you're talking about, a kind of a formulaic sound. Probably a lot of those guys you're talking about, virtual drummer. Here's the thing. Took a lot of time, a lot of energy, brought in a great engineer into my studio to get my drums. I only play a 4-piece kit, but we dialed it. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the first things when I sent the mix off to Simone, and he did that thing like you said. He put the sample on this and he put that, and it's like sounding like everybody else. And I said, hey, how about we just start with the drums? I go, get rid of all that stuff. Get rid of all that stuff. You're sucking the life force out of my playing, number one. And number two, it sounds like everybody else's record. And I go, that's not what my drums sound. I go, it doesn't sound like everybody else's stuff. And once you got that, we were done. It was over, and then he realized, wow, I can use this guy's kit and all the different mics that he has with the overheads and the front of house and whatever, and really make it happen without having to go to the samples. And I think the other thing that you really see on that record is the dynamics that a lot of other bands' records don't have. We didn't do that brick line limiting thing where everything's just smashed up to the top and pushing forward. The songs themselves, before you even get to recording them, have great dynamics, and they have great parts and subtleties and those kind of things. And that comes along with the musicians that you bring in. If I brought a bunch of 22-year-old dudes in that were, headbangers or something, probably wouldn't get the same subtlety, So you're talking about, highly accomplished players that are playing for the song. And Simone did an amazing job. Let's not take anything away from him. He did an amazing job. But like you're saying, you don't want to sound like all those other guys that are doing the 27, different records that are all the same.
Correct.
So, a lot of it does come back to the fact that, it's acoustic drums, like I said, I've got all the gear that any big time studio would have. And he worked with that, and did an amazing job. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I noticed things. Now, I'm not saying all of these albums that these producers make sound terrible. And I'm not saying it's a terrible thing, but when I see something that stands out like that, that's something I like to bring up because it's just it's kind of a rarity, and I could tell you that I had this thing cranked up so loud that the building back here behind my house was shaking. I mean, it was that, and everything was just so crystal clear coming out of this big shelf system that I have sitting next to me. And it was really cool. And, you mentioned something else too, when you were talking about, I want every song to be a single, because I'm going to say something else about the record that I think was great is I was listening to this, over the weekend, and people that don't normally listen to this kind of music, and they're like, who is this? And then I showed them the album and told them about the musicians, where a lot of these guys had played, bands they've played with. And they were like this, they were literally, and they're not people that listen to any kind of hard rock music or anything. And they actually thought it sounded good. And that is something I think is also really great about the album.
Again, thank you. I mean, I can keep going on with the thank yous, but, again, we were really trying, commercial hard rock with a twist. It appeals to more people. You can have the greatest power metal band, but you're going to turn off a lot of people, right away. This one, we were trying to cover that word keeps coming up, trying to hit the masses, trying to hit a bigger audience. It's like, why not? Isn't that what you're supposed to try to do? I always thought that's what you're supposed to do. And that's where I was trying to look to go with this band. It's not a small little club band, with guys and everybody's 2 feet away watching every little note kind of thing. It's like a big rock band, and it was always the favorite stuff that I had that I loved, and just wanted to go in that direction and just really love it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go back to a little bit of history because you've played in a lot of stuff, a lot of projects and stuff that I've been a fan of. I will tell you that when I first started my radio show, I used to sit back and we'd play a public service. I'd play like a show after a pre-recorded thing afterwards. And because I had to be there for that, I would go back into record library and I would just pull out random heavy metal bands that were back there, mostly in vinyl at that point. And I discovered the Warlord stuff which obviously you were playing on, and I really liked it. And it's interesting and it's sad. It's sad that Bill passed away, recently. But those Warlord records are really good. Even the one with Joachim singing on it, I thought was pretty good as well. But what are some of your best memories from Bill? Because I was never able to really ever have him on my show, for whatever timing reasons or whatnot.
Yeah.
But I would have always loved to have interviewed him, in the past. And what are some of your best memories of him in being in that band?
Well, I'll give you two. Picture 17-year-old kid in San Jose, California, very conservative town, rainy day, sitting at a bus stop. He's got his sunglasses on, got the longish hair at the time, red and white striped shirt, kind of like what the Scorpions used to wear, the tight Jordache jeans and the Capizios, writing Lucifer's Hammer. The guy was brilliant in a conversation.
Yeah.
It just one in a million. A lot of great guitar players, a lot of great writers. Bill had the whole thing. He had the whole thing. He had concepts that went so much deeper with Warlord that if anybody invested at any point, it would make Kiss kind of look like a circus in the respect of Bill had a little bit more serious kind of things, but kind of not like Maiden, but just, it's not even science fiction, but he was a very well-read, deep, smart guy, and he just had those things. Best memory I with Bill, well, it's two. We finally get to play in Greece, and we're sitting backstage, and the opening band's playing, but all I hear is Warlord, Warlord over the top, and I look at Bill and I go, man, this was like playing an Iron Maiden, where every night they love you, you can do whatever you want, and as much as we both had a smirk on our face, like, okay, this is going to be great, and it was. We both kind of looked at each other and said, what the hell took so long? Because it was so many years after, and we struggled so many years in the beginning and never could get traction. But one of the best memories, we did our first demo, and it was just him and me. He was playing bass. I think it was Child of the Damned, Lucifer's Hammer, something like that, your goofy little studio, whatever. And we come home to the apartment that we lived in, and I think alcohol was probably involved at the time, but we kept playing the songs over and over, and we kept sticking our ears like this far from the speaker because we were convinced it was sounding better the closer you get to the speaker. And I'll never forget. I have a picture of it, but it's etched in my mind. The look on his face, the big smile of like, wow, you and me jammed in these warehouses for a couple of years, and we did this and we did that, and it was just him and I. And then it got to that point where there's actually something tangible.
Yeah.
So yeah, just unbelievable talent. Straight shooter, just a great guy. Had a lot of health problems at the end that I know a lot of people probably don't know about, but that's kind of why things kind of, I don't want to say stalled. We never had any problems. It wasn't like a problem thing. It was just the matter of, was he able to do it? And
Correct.
He just told me, he had, abdominal problems, and that'll knock you down.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that could have been that coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Yeah. And you look at the new record you just put, this A to Z album, it's kind of funny, ironic, because when I said this was like a flawless album, you covered everything A to Z, right? I mean, that's kind of what it feels like. And the other thing that I think is great is everybody in this band seems to have a great musical chemistry together. Now, I know you've played with Ray, in Fates Warning for quite a while. So I knew you probably obviously had that with him, but everybody really gelled well, and played well together on this thing. And I think that you can kind of feel that from listening to it and get that vibe from it. You talked about a positive vibe, and that was one of the things that really was a positive vibe of the record itself.
Absolutely. You're just talking about high quality people that understand what we're doing. There wasn't a whole lot of ego thing going on. I mean, actually, truth be told, I'm the guy who said, hey, let's let it go 3 times around for the lead in Trial by Fire, not just 2. You know what I mean? I was kind of looking at everything. I'm just kind of looking at it, what's going to be best for the song.
Yeah.
I got a whole thing where I want like the first minute and a half to be like that Chicago I'm a Man kind of thing, where it's all just percussion and then the bass player comes in and stuff like that. It's just about the music and being creative. And like you said, I think, that record right there sounds very fresh, very original. I think one of the beauties is you really do have 5 different individuals. I'm older than all the guys in the band. Viv's telling me that, him and Jupe in high school are listening to records that I was doing. And, probably doing records when he was 3 and 4, probably something like that. It was like, I'm old as his dad. So everybody is really just coming from a different place, life experiences.
Right.
Also influences. We're not all like sitting around being great Rainbow fans, so your band's going to sound like Rainbow. Everybody has their different intakes. It's also, I told myself from the very beginning that I'm just going to, anything, everything is going into this record. Look at it like Jeff Porcaro said, you got to look at them all like it's your last one. Just look at it as like your last one. So brought the electronics in, brought the sound effect, different things in, brought, tried to put the air and the space in there, but at the same time, really get my point across on heavier things. And it was just, it was a great experience just putting it all together. Right now we're in the middle of, round 2, and we actually just had a big Zoom meeting today. And, we've got ideas floating around and working on music. And again, you work with people that know how to use a computer and can send files. And it's, the beauty of that is like, you'd say to me, hey man, I don't really like that verse. I'd be like, hold on, give me 2 minutes. I'd walk over there and I'd cut a different verse and send it back. Well, what do you think of that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a very flawless work as far as that goes, and then it's just a matter of, picking things out and putting them together and kind of going from there.
Well, I'm definitely hoping there's a follow-up. So you just pretty much answered my next question, because it'd be really hard to not make another album with these guys. I mean, just, with just the way that this thing came out. And this was, I never put expectations on anything because I didn't know what to expect from this thing. I don't read anybody's reviews. I sort of blindly listen to it. Kind of like when you go blindly listen to a record, you buy at a record shop, say before the internet happened and before you even had, before any of this downloading or anything happened. And the thing is, I missed, whatever the electronic press kit or whatever would have went for this. And I just ended up buying the record. I figured, I know these musicians, this thing's got to be at least decent. And I was actually blown away by it when from the first song on, it blew me away. And I really hope there's a follow-up. I think you guys really, for me personally, as a fan, I will tell you that I'm already looking forward to it. You talking about it. So
yeah, unfortunately this day and age, you run into the thing of like record budgets aren't what they are. So no one's getting rich. I mean, you're lucky if you can get the record done. Again, you're talking about, I'm not talking about my cousin mixing it. You're talking about real people because you want that result. You're not going to get that result, for a quarter of the price that you got to pay. So that's very important.
Yeah.
I think it's all a waste of time unless, like you said, you come out with that presentation. I think we achieved that, but it costs some money. It costs money. But yeah, it's we'll see. We're doing it now, and I can just tell you from the little things that we've been playing around with, and we all have these ideas and drum grooves and keyboard ideas, and the music's not the problem. Putting music together like that's not a problem. That's we don't sit there and go, I don't know, man. You got a riff? What do you got? We don't do that. I think since November when the record came out, I've recorded like 195 different drum ideas that I've sent to Viv at various tempos.
Sure.
So, we're busy.
So I'm going to talk to you about some other projects you've done. Now, you did the Spirits of Fire thing, which I thought was very good. But Chris Caffrey's a great guitar player, and he's actually a really super nice guy. And I've had him
super nice guy.
Yeah, and I've had him on the show a few times. And talk about working with those albums. I mean, the first one you had Ripper singing on it, and then you had Fabio Leone, which, I mean, you can't ask for two completely different singers, when people that contrast each other vocally. And, I thought that I think those records are very good. And maybe talk a bit about working with those guys.
Well, it was more about that. That was definitely a band where, okay, Mark, you're the drummer. Okay. Like you said, Chris is the nicest guy in the world. And he would just send me riffs, like what he thought was happening in riffs. And I'd record drums to it. And it was kind of as simple as that. I would hear what he was doing, never had any idea of what the vocals were doing because that was later on. And I would just, like I do, it doesn't matter if it's Fates Warning A through Z, or if it's your record or anybody, I always look at recording drums the same way. I sit down, I listen, and I start playing around and trying to be as creative, and then take it out a little further and take it out a little further and try to really, be creative. I'm not that guy that right off the top, the first thing that I do is great. You know what I mean? It's like, you kind of got to work your way into it, and, a lot of trial and error, but, the time and the energy goes into it. But It was great. I mean, Steve DiGiorgio is great. Very funny guy. Chris is totally cool, totally unassuming, just totally like a nice guy. He's just a very nice guy. Honestly, didn't have any interactions with the singers except, with Ripper when we did those couple of videos. Unfortunately, the second album, all those videos, everybody had to shoot them in their own place, kind of thing. So I never really met anybody. That's on Frontier. So, that's nothing new for them to be putting out those kind of records. And, it was cool. I mean, really easy to do. There was no, stress. I'm just not a big fan of stress in music. They really shouldn't go together. I always joke, if I want more stress, I'll have more kids. I mean, it's kind of like, just, especially at this point in the game, I'm not 19. I don't have to get in a van to go on the road to prove that I can do it or like for the experience. Yeah. So they got to be fun. You got to be into the music. You got to liking the guys obviously makes it much better. But honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of interaction. A lot of emails with me and Chris, and phone calls, putting stuff together, and easy. I mean, I joke about this, but I could have sent him back polka drums, and he'd been cool. Cool. He's that kind of guy. He wasn't, on my back or it was kind of like, dude, do what you do, and we'll take it from there. And that's how those records work. There wasn't a whole lot of change this, change that. Oh, we're going to do 6 days. No, it was like, let's just do it.
Yeah. And that it's funny. Chris Caffrey does like an amazing Austin Powers impression. I've met him for the first time back in 1998. When I started the show, Sabotage still existed. That's how long ago that was. But he was in my car with John Oliva, and he was in the back seat just doing Austin Powers. That's the first time I ever met him. Yeah. But I had him on a few years ago, and he's actually a very cool dude to talk to. Yeah, I even met him when he was, and I met him when he was playing guitar with Guitars for Metal Church when one of their guitar players couldn't do it, and he did a phenomenal job. But he's a great musician, and I think it's really cool you worked with him. What's interesting too about those Spirits of Fire albums is every vocalist, kind of like this record in a sense, every vocalist or every member, it comes from a completely different background. They're completely different types of musicians, and I thought that was an interesting combination of people that you had on those.
Yeah, no, it does make something interesting instead of everybody being the same. Mm-hmm. Not to speak of 6 degrees of separation, but the shirt you're wearing. Yeah, I'll be hanging out with Nick Van Dyke tonight, going to see Kansas.
Well, you tell Nick I said hi. I haven't talked to him in quite a long time, but he's a good dude. I haven't spoken to him in probably a couple years, but he's a good guy. And I'll tell you what, I love the stuff that Nick has done. I actually love this album and the one before it. And he's, the thing is too, the one thing I like about Redemption is the last album was unbelievable. Where the shirt came from is actually was unbelievable. And I think I had him on the show. We talked about it for a little bit, and man, phenomenal record. I can't wait for their next one. I really can't. So give Nick my regards. He should. I'm sure he'll definitely remember me. And yeah, great band. I love Redemption, and another great band that Ray sang in. And speaking of that, you played in Fates Warning for quite a long time, and I think the first album that I ever, believe it or not, I'm a very late comer to that band. I never really ended up getting into them until I did the radio show. So my first ever experience was A Pleasant Shade of Gray, which was an interesting album, but it was funny because I was really getting into concept albums back then. I was really into like the Arion stuff, for example, and then Pleasant Shade of Gray comes out, and I think whoever was at Metal Blade at the time was telling me, yeah, this album, really get into it. You're gonna have to really digest it. And right away I ended up getting it because I was already listening to Arion, and you had this long concept record going on. Yeah. And that was my first exposure to them, but you were in that band a number of years, and Fates Warning is a much different band than most of the stuff you've done. And talk about the experience playing in that band for as long as you did.
Well, I was there for 15 years, gave it everything I had. Jim basically, invited me, to play in the band. There was no audition or any of that. They were looking to go in a different direction. Jim was a big Warlord fan, as well as I had helped with the drum tuning and drum processing on 2 of their prior records.
Mm-hmm.
So they had already rehearsed in my studio and been in the studio, and I helped Steve with the drums and Bill Matoyer. I used to help Bill all the time with drum tuning and stuff like that. It was a great learning ground. It's unfortunate what happened with Parallels and how the whole music industry, changed and kind of killed what we were doing. Now there's a record. Parallels is an unbelievable record.
Yeah.
Great, unbelievable record. No, great experience. I had nothing bad to say. It just came to a point 15 years in. I was getting married and starting a family, and let's face it, we weren't Rush or the Rolling Stones, so things would happen, that were more suited for, maybe people that are younger or, not in committed relationships or whatever the case may be, where, hey man, 2 weeks we're going on tour. I was like, well, wait a minute, I have a whole studio business going, you're married, whatever the case may be. It's different for different people. Plus I was a few years older than all those guys. And I just went to Jim and I said, hey, I just can't do the touring, kind of schedule. And I don't want to disappoint. I don't want to be that guy like, hey man, I can't do it. So if we could work something out where I continue to record the records, I wouldn't be a member of the band. We could work out the money, whatever the case may be. I just love the process and the beauty of the 3 of us, with me, Jim, and Ray at the time, of what we were doing. And Jim just said he wanted to have someone that was in the band full time, recording the records and touring. And I said, okay, I respect your decision. Obviously we're not on the outs. He asked me to play on the Arch Mateos record. I played on 2 songs.
Yeah.
So if we hated each other that much, I don't think he would have called me. Do we hang out together and watch the Chargers game? No. Jim doesn't watch football anyways, but that's beside the point. But no, everything's fine. Everybody likes to read into it and make stuff up and whatever. It just came to a time and a place, that's all.
Yeah, in Parallels and Perfect Symmetry, those albums are phenomenal. And I think if they had maybe come a little bit earlier, they would have been a lot bigger than what they were. But I definitely look at those 2 albums as 2 records that should have really been more popular than say what they were. I mean, those are really great albums. And that was, believe it or not, so Pleasant Shade of Gray, when that came out, I listened to it, and then I didn't really listen to Fates Warning much at all. And then when all the reissues started coming out, that's when I started going in, and then I just went insane and bought the whole back catalog at that point and became a fan of them. So definitely a band that I wish I would have been into a lot earlier, but I guess it's like a better late than never type thing.
Yeah, and I think one big point that you mentioned there that caused, besides the whole grunge movement that came in with Parallels, because it was kind of poised with Metal Blade and Warner Brothers and all that. But the real bottom line is, Fates Warning never really had a chance to be on a major label with a major push. There's a lot of those other bands that you talk about are on major labels. They have tour support. They have 3 real deal videos, and this is by no means, sour grapes or, it happens to a million bands. It's not just us. But what I'm saying is, from a strictly business point of view, it's really tough, to pop it wide open without some kind of support. It just doesn't happen. Those days of guys jamming and the next day they're on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. It's even gotten completely worse over the last 20, 25 years. So even back then, we were poised, with the whole thing of Metal Blade and Warner Brothers. And if you sell so many, and then they take over, and then the whole kind of grunge thing came in, and it kind of sealed that deal right there.
Right. Well, why do you think it has gotten worse over the last 20, 25 years? I'm curious what your take is on that.
It's about, you can blame both the industry and the listener. If the listener is going to be satisfied with an MP3 with earbuds, and they're good with that, if a band can't afford to go in and really craft and create an amazing sounding record, because amazing sounding records cost money.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, everybody's got their own little home studios today, and that's cute and that's cool. But to have a guy who really knows what he's doing to bring that out, it just costs money. So I think it's a combination of the both. And also, there is no artist development. It's funny because this time around, like I joke, I said, I could have the greatest, I could have 25-year-old Ronnie James Dio. No label would have cared. They want to know, okay, how many did the last guy sell? What kind of name recognition are we going to use to move this? I don't see a whole lot going on with development of bands or taking chances on certain things. It's about money. It's about the dollar. And I get it. but I think that's part of what's changed it as well. Also,
Yeah.
the fact of what the consumer will put up with, and also the fact where there's 75,000 releases per week kind of dilutes the pool. Back in the day,
Yeah.
You had to be at a certain level. I mean, you just had to be at a certain level to move on to the next level. Like
Right.
with a label, and then that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it goes back to when I mentioned the numbers game earlier. So 25 years ago, 25 years ago, you would get stuff mailed to you. Obviously, they didn't have any. There was no downloading back in those days.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you wanted to wait 40. I think the first I mentioned this on a Facebook post, but the first song I ever downloaded is Virgin Records in Europe sent me a Blind Guardian song off their new album, and it took 45 minutes to download it. That's where we're going. That's how far back we're going. And
Yep.
I would get maybe 4 to 5 releases maybe a week that were being pushed by multiple people, by multiple publicists. There were probably 4 or 5 real major people that promoted stuff for radio. And then, you'd probably, maybe if you were lucky, had 20 albums a month. Now, if I open my email box right now, I think today alone, I downloaded 200 emails from 200 different publicists, each one having like 10 different bands that you've never heard of. And you'll get like 200 or 300, 400, 500 electronic press kits here. There's no way I could ever listen to all that stuff. So I sort of guide myself in a direction of certain record labels that, I really know that I like a lot of those bands. And then, some of them will sign a new act once in a while, but I've come to the point now, believe it or not, it's now more old school. I go by word of mouth from people, because what really always upsets me a little bit is that you'll get some side project, and I'm not going to name it. I'm just saying that I'm not naming anybody, but you'll get a side project from somebody that's terrible, but they have a name recognition and everybody will think it's the greatest thing. But then you get a band that puts out this killer album and nobody cares about it. And that is something that I actually have a huge issue with. And a lot of times I think people just want things spoon fed to them. And, that's unfortunate.
I think it's that. And I also think those days, it's interesting with, I learned a couple things on, this time around and all the press that I did. And I pushed and pushed, just give me everything you got. Give me everything you got. And it's very interesting because very few people, and what my big thing was, you get a review from somebody, that's cool, but I'd go back and read other reviews that they did because I'd be curious how, like, their mindset per se. And it's almost turned into a little bit of an age where everything's great, everything's great, how can everything be great? You got a quick story though. I gotta love this. And this tells you the topsy-turvy world. I do an interview and the guy does a review, says it's the great, like you're talking, greatest thing since sliced bread, just greatest thing, whatever. 8.5. Like, okay, that's cool, whatever. Okay. Then I'll have to do an interview and this and that, and the cover's so ugly and and whatever, and like kind of dog you out. And then you get a 9. I'm like kind of go, okay. So that it's kind of just up for what it is,
Right.
But yeah, I'm sure you're flooded.
It happens like that, but I can assure you that if you talk to Nick, I want to bring him up again. He will tell you that if I tell you that I really like this album, that I'm not bullshitting you at all. I mean, that's just the way. That's the way I've always been.
Well, I saw you online. That's how the whole thing got going.
Yeah. So I just don't bullshit people. And remember, when I tell people too, everyone, I've had that criticism, levied at me. Actually, I've had it said, well, why do you think everything's great? And I'm like, well, here's the thing. When I go on, music is a subjective thing, right? I mean, it really, art in general, regardless of what it is, it could be photography, it could be music, whatever, it's very subjective. So, I might get 200, I might listen to 50 albums, but how many am I really going online and talking about? I might like 10 or 12 of them and I'll review them, because what I don't like to get involved with, unless it's a legacy band that I really like an Iron Maiden or somebody else that I like, that I've been into for a long time. Some bands just don't resonate with you, and I don't want to sit out there and just dog somebody out because I don't like the music, because realistically there's a thousand other people that do. And
Yeah.
As an artist, I really don't like to get into that, like, being a hater type thing, because that's really what it is. And my whole, as a mission for me, is really anybody that I bring on the show, anybody that any musicians that move me, I like to keep that more positive light involved, instead of going online and with some of these reviewers where they just go out and completely trash the band and, just decimate and destroy them. And
Yeah.
I can't really consciously go out and do that,
No, I
because
understand.
it doesn't resonate with me.
That's a great point. I mean, that's a very thing. What you're going to do is the positive stuff. You're just not going to deal, with the records that you don't like, or that you don't, that you think that, you're basically promoting things that you really dig, is what it kind of comes down to.
Basically, correct.
That's great. That's perfect.
Now,
Yeah,
I might,
makes sense.
I had a podcast once, and I said that there was a certain band that, I love the band, but I think that they had been in this realm of mediocrity for a long time. And, I was referring to Iron Maiden in a sense, where I don't really dislike the albums, but they're not records that I constantly go to. And, everyone, I got lambasted for it, but then, obviously, because people like to point out the negative, right? And I told them, but here's the thing that's funny is when I listen to these albums, when I listen to the live album that always comes out afterwards, the songs sound great live. It's just whatever they do on the record, just doesn't really mesh with me very much. I don't know. They're not bad, but they're not like, it's not Number of the Beast, right? So,
I hear you.
and as I said before, I'm just not that guy where I'm going to go out and completely trash somebody. Now, if somebody in the metal scene does something stupid, where they deserve that, then yeah, I'll talk about it, or some kind of controversial subject, and yeah, sure, I'll give my perspective on it. But as far as people's albums or bands' albums, I've never been that guy where I really want to go on some of these websites and they just want to trash the band, and that's something that I've never been. So I tell people, if I'm talking about it and I'm reviewing it and I'm listening to it, there's probably 10 other records I didn't like.
Got it. No, that makes perfect sense.
And so
cool.
So that's pretty much how it goes. But I understand what you're saying. Does it sound great with earbuds? Yada yada yada. I get that. But some people, I think a little bit of that is changing with a lot of people, at least from people that I've encountered, or people that a lot of the younger kids I see at like metal shows, which I never thought would happen, but it's happened. And a lot of them are like, man, I wish this album would have sounded better, or this album sounds really great. So I'm hearing more of that. But 10 years ago, maybe not so much.
Exactly. But 20 years ago, yes, absolutely. And you used to get crucified when you didn't have,
Yeah.
I remember.
That's how it is. And it's funny. I always listen, when I listen to these albums, we were talking about, virtual drummer and people sounding synthetic and stuff like that. But, you could sit there and you could have backing tracks if you really try, but it's really, when it comes to a drummer, it's really hard to hide that. I mean, from the live perspective, the drummer's the foundation of everything. Right. Mm-hmm. And for me, like when I would go on stage and I would play with a band, if all the instruments had cut out except the drums, I could literally sing an entire song, because the drummer is really what you go by. And so when bands don't really have great drummers, I'm not going to name who it is, but I witnessed the band actually trying to do drum backing tracks, and it failed miserably. And they're somewhat well known. And
wow, that's a little scary.
It is, but they got sort of called out for it, and then they didn't do it again. It's nobody that I'm friends with. I just happened to notice it when I was backstage at a show. They were opening up for a band that I know, and people have tried it, but when it comes to the live show, let's face it, you're not going to hide that, and I think the drummer in the band these days, because of these plugins and all this other stuff, has become almost underappreciated, in my opinion, whereas before it really wasn't.
Yeah, well, I think also, you mentioned and you talked about it, and I purposely brought it up, and I've talked about it several times. On this record, we mixed with our ears. We didn't mix with our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
We're not aligning everything. I know a lot of bands, big bands, little bands, it's got to be on the grid. That's why the production company, I call it Off the Grid Productions, because, it can't be out of time and it can't be wacky, but rock and roll and music is supposed to breathe.
Right.
And there's a push and shove to it. To sit there, and I know bands do it all the time, and I'm an expert at it if I need be, but you just sit there and cut, and you move every little kick drum right to the thing and everything like that. It's like, why bother? I kind of have this theory: if you can't play it, then don't record it. Come up with a different part that you can play. Yeah, maybe it takes you, a long time to get it down. That's fine. But at the same time, all that virtual stuff and and cutting and pasting, the choruses and the verses and stuff like that. Again, it's downplaying all the music. Taking kind of sucking the life force out of everything.
Yeah. And, you said getting it down and taking time, because isn't that what you had to do when you were recording on analog tape? If you think about
absolutely.
it,
Yeah.
you had to be, because analog tape you had 15 minutes. You only had maybe 4 to 8 tracks, depending what kind of tape you were using.
Yeah.
And you had to have that down to go in there, because that stuff, number one, the tape wasn't cheap. There was, splicing and editing digitally is a lot different than taking a tape and splicing it.
Yep.
And I've actually done that, and you had to shit together. I mean, that's probably the best way to put it. And so I'm a firm believer in that as well. I would never want to record something that I couldn't go in front of people and do. I don't want to use auto-tune, pitch correction, all this other stuff. But at that time, it sounds so over-processed that, it sounds terrible, at least in my opinion. And
yeah, but that's what I think we started this whole show with, when you started talking about the way the album sounds. That's because none of that's going on.
No.
And it's not loose, but it's loose for people that are going to be on the grid, so no, you're absolutely right. It's yes, technology is great and there's ways to use it, but then there's a line, and then it gets like stupid.
Yeah.
I've done sessions with guys where they say, hey, here's a thing, go ahead and cut it, and I cut it, and they go, well, can you do it more like the drum machine? I go, why don't you just use the drum machine? It's like, if you want it that way,
yeah,
that all I'm going to do is make it have a little bit more feel, which you don't want, because you want it like the drum machine. So, to each his own. But no, from my point of view, it's just got to be live. Like, it's got to have that thing,
So the significance, let's talk about this, the significance of the cover, the zebra eating an apple, in this band name A to Z, what inspired that, and talk about what these two, what the kind of the meaning is between both of these.
Well, obviously anybody in a band knows the toughest thing about a band is the name.
Yeah.
Okay. So we went round and round and round and round and round and round. Not that we went round and round, we just couldn't come up with nothing and come up with anything. And Ray says one day, hey, how about A through Z? Now, honestly, I don't know if he thought it was Alder and Zonder. I don't know if it was, like you said, it's all encompassing and it covers all the styles. I'm not sure, but I just kind of went, perfect. I go, and it's kind of what I wanted band name. I didn't want to be like Kill the Dragon, or I don't mean to be rude, but Spirits of Fire. There's certain connotations, and by the same time, I didn't want an album cover with the Viking cutting the snake's head off while people are rummaging through the desert, as nomads looking for the promised land.
Yeah.
Kind of wanted that thing, like we talked about, that just jumps, different, unique. I think it fits the music, because the music isn't, if you had that cover and we were a power metal band, it might be a little weird.
Kind of like the new Gravedigger album with
yeah, that's not going to fit what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, and it's an interesting story. Again, had a lot of people turn in stuff, couldn't figure out, the art was not happening. I just decided to call Hugh Syme and say, hey, been a long time. How you been? Blah, 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 blah. What are you doing musically? Oh, here's the name of that. Okay, man, we'll talk soon. Okay. 20 minutes later, he sent me the cover, so he had it going on already in his head, kind of thing. And again, to me, it was more about something different, like Philip Bino said, I would buy that t-shirt even if there wasn't a band, just for the iconic thing. And if you've ever seen it, and I've seen it between Spotify reviews and all these kind of things, when they put the 7 or 8 albums out together, that's the one that pops right off the page.
Yeah.
It draws people to the attention to it. So, certain people don't like it. They think the zebra needs to go to the dentist. Okay, cool. But it's that whole package. And if you look at all the artwork that Hugh did for it, no, seriously, I got
Did somebody say that?
Oh my God. Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Oh, I'm not sure how much you read other people's stuff, but
I don't.
Okay. I'll cue you in. There's been reviews where 3/4 of the article is about the cover. And it's kind of like, I don't know, you ever heard that Allen Iverson thing? Practice.
Yeah.
Practice. Same thing. The cover? Really? You're going to go, 3/4 of your thing into the cover. It's not offensive. It's not racist. It's not, feminine, it's none of that. It's just, it's art. Like you said, it's art, He told me flat out when he did Signals, the dog in the fire hydrant, Ray Daniels, the manager of Rush, ran into his office and said, "What are you out of your freaking mind? What is this?" Turns out to be the most popular album cover he ever did.
Yeah.
So again, it's art. I think it's unbelievable. It was perfect. I like that thing kind of on the edge. Isn't rock and roll about taking chances? Isn't rock and roll kind of about pushing that envelope? 30 years from now, when someone sees that thing, they'll know what it is. I'm not sure how many bands can really say that, but no, it's again, toughest thing is the name of a band. And then the next toughest thing is the album cover.
Yeah. Well, Hugh has always done some interesting covers that really kind of are atypical compared to what most people do. And I, like I said, the cover is really more like icing on a cake. I don't really put as much into it, but you talk about, how much do I read people's stuff? I don't. And the reason being is when I read people's stuff, my whole way of reviewing something is giving more of my perspective on it, on the band itself, and how it compares to things, and instead of really like going track by track and analyzing every single time change and what's the drummer playing, that kind of, I don't really do that kind of stuff because most people really are not interested in things like that. I've always been somebody, I give my perspective on the album. I talk about what, the people that are in the band itself, and give my perspective of how much I think they contributed or improved upon it, or, whatever. I'm just speaking and I'm generalizing here, but that is something how I like to do it, because then, you can judge for yourself. Let's say, look, this band, this sounds a lot like a combination of maybe the last album and an album that maybe came out 10 years ago. That's the vibe I get from it. And that's really more or less how I review stuff. And sometimes what I like to do too is take interview clips. Like when I review this, I'll probably do an actual review. I'll probably take parts of this interview and throw it in there, to give people perspective of what I'm talking about.
Just to let you know, I got about 20 minutes.
Oh, that's fine. We're almost done.
Is that okay? I just wanted to see if there's something specific, it's just, I got to run out and grab my kids and all that routine. So.
Oh no, it's all good. I'm actually going to be watching the game here in a minute. So
I'm getting booted to the game.
That's right. That's right. We'll see what happens.
Good.
We'll see if we.
Bye, Mark. Bye.
But we'll be watching it. We'll be watching the game here anyway. I do appreciate you coming on though, because I've never spoken to you before. I mean, we've spoke online in the past, and I'm really, in back of my mind, I've wanted to have you on my show a few times, and things happen. Kids, we have that going on as well. So you have a lot of stuff going on, and not only that, but I was really bringing the podcast to YouTube. I mean, it's only been around for about 3 weeks, and so a lot of things I'm sort of transitioning into that and getting away from the audio only thing. I found out the video thing works great. And it's great to be I like to have face-to-face interviews are so much more fun, man. They really are, because I always loved when I would go face-to-face and talk to a band in person. A lot of times that can't always happen. So the next best thing is this. And so when I get up, at 4 a.m, I'm interviewing people in bands from over in Europe, and then I come at night and get to interview people from here. It's always a lot of fun to be able to do that and talk to a lot of people I've never spoken to or I've never been on a show before. So it was a lot of fun talking to you, in all seriousness.
No, I appreciate it. Again, I just look at this as a sales pitch for the band. I know a lot of guys like, man, I'm not doing interviews, man, and I'm burnt. I'm the opposite. I mean, this is business, man. This is about business. And if two people, and I'm not saying only 2 people listen to your show, but if 2 people hear this and go buy the record and they tell 2 friends and 2 friends or whatever, I did my job. That's what it's all about. If you think you're going to do it and the label is going to make it happen for you, those days are long gone. So as much as you can do to push, man. And, also too, I think it's important to do these kind of things because so much crap on the internet and so on and so forth gets twisted 6 ways to Sunday. And all of a sudden, Zonder's a Nazi. And it's kind of like, it's like when you have a face-to-face, you get an idea. Oh man, that's what he means. That's what he's talking about. So
yeah, well, I can tell you, I'm not a fan of that. I don't twist anybody's stuff around. I'll never forget. I did this interview. The first ever interview I ever had on the show was with a drummer. Actually, it was with Charlie Benante of Anthrax. This was back in 1998. So the 20th anniversary of the show, everybody that I had on that was alive, because there were like 3 people who were deceased that obviously I wasn't going to have on, but I ended up getting him on the show, and it was funny. We were talking about how the music industry changed, and he brought up pretty similar points to what you brought up about, an MP3 with earbuds and stuff like that. We were speaking to before, and he said something like, he thought that a lot of these he named like 5 or 6 different companies, that he feels helped contribute to things kind of going downhill, in the music industry, and so he's naming like, Rhapsody and Napster and iTunes and all these other, these MP3 only things. And so like I put the interview up, I put it up on the podcast, and in like, I don't know, like 2 days later, all of a sudden Blabbermouth puts out this big thing. It says Charlie Benante says iTunes is the downfall of the music industry. That's definitely not what was said. I mean, it's not how it was worded. So,
but we know that's Blabbermouth. That I've gotten rammed on that show too.
Yeah. Right. So I've never been about that. My whole thing is this. You're talking about sales pitch. For me, in doing this kind of stuff, it's really more about, hey, you know what? I love interviewing bands. I've been doing this for a very long time. It's just fun to be able to talk to musicians, get the different perspectives on things, and get to kind of connect with artists that you're really into. And that's really my main. At this point, this is more fun than anything. And if it puts bands into a positive light, in my opinion, that's really what my whole goal is. I mean, and I worked for a band for a number of years, a German heavy metal band for a number of years that I'm friends with, and I can tell you that, putting things in a positive light for a lot of these artists, especially when they're not as well known, especially here, is something I actually love doing. And it just sort of just continued. And I think when my son got into a lot of this music, that kind of re-energized me a little bit. So it's what happened.
Cool. I'm definitely looking forward to your review. And that's a great idea. Cutting clips in and so on and so forth.
I go back to old interviews. I actually have a couple reviews I'm putting up from bands where I have interview clips from like 2003. That's how much stuff that I have like archived for years. And it's just a lot of fun. So, we'll end this off here before, we end off the interview. Any last words to people, any of the fans? And then also tell me where you can buy a lot of the merchandise. I think you mentioned Vision merch. You put a link up there, which by the way, they do a phenomenal job. I've ordered stuff from them and end up getting it in like 3 days.
No, Mick or Mike, whatever. I'm not sure how it pronounces his name, but no, that's exactly where you go to Vision merchandise. We have the t-shirts, we have the hoodie, we have the baseball jersey, we have the metal plaques that are the album cover. We actually have 10-inch version of Remo putting the album cover on a 10-inch head.
Oh, that is cool.
No one can really afford the bass drums. That gets a little crazy if you want to go that way. But we have them there, and there's actually going to be coming up soon. We're doing a little sneak preview here. We're doing a deal where you order 3 things off the site, you get a free autographed drumstick that was actually used on the record. Okay. Not like ProMark, does it and they stamp it. They're beat to crap, and it's my signature, and you can't miss it. So no, again, the merch is great. They do a great job. So yeah, it's definitely Vision merch. Who's got A through Z, and cool. It's all there.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, it was great having you on. I'll obviously hit stop. We'll talk for like about a minute before we go. But hey, it was great to have you on the show, and I look forward to doing this again. I look forward to another record coming out. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think, when it comes out.
Absolutely. Anything I can do, you got like a question comes up or you have something, how to reach me, man. Just get in touch with me. I'll be here.
Sure. Hold on 1 second.